Well, good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining us today on another one of our wonderful webinars on workplace mental health and some of the things that we can be doing or thinking about, or how we might be able to have an impact in this space. I hope everybody's enjoying their wonderful Michigan summer. The last month or so has been pretty decent for being outdoors. I know we had some hot times ahead of that. Certainly today, for many of us watching, is not a day you would be outdoors. Some of our participants are under a tornado watch, so if they suddenly flee from their screen, it's because they got a warning that they have to leave. So don't feel bad if you're in that situation as well, and make sure you take care of yourself. We do have the threat of some severe weather out there if you've not been watching the news or getting the alerts or something like that. Keep in mind throughout the webinar that there's a Q&A box at the top of your screen, and you can submit your questions at any time throughout the presentation. We'll get to as many as we can at the end. As you know, sometimes we can get to many, sometimes we only get to a few. We do our best, so please submit any questions that you might have. And if you haven't already, please make sure you sign up for our emails on our michigan.gov/workplace mental health page. That'll get you any information we're putting out, including the invites to the webinars and other information. And all of our webinars are recorded, and the links are on that page as well. So if you're looking back for information, like we did a lot of great ones in May, those are all posted there. You can find all of our webinars there, our report, and other resources that are available to working people and their employers on how they might be able to handle and improve workplace wellness. So for those of you joining us for the first time, I imagine many are repeat participants, which we love and appreciate. If you're joining us for the first time, we launched this webinar series in January, and we have been holding webinars throughout the year, typically on the third Thursday of each month at 2 p.m. But as you can see today, we do adjust that for our speakers to make sure that we're providing good content, just not quantity of webinars. We have a couple in mind that we're going to add to our upcoming webinar series in the coming month or so. So you'll see a couple of invites outside of the normal schedule on some great topics we think you'll be interested in too. We have a great lineup throughout the rest of the year, so make sure you tune in, because we're going to be talking about a lot of interesting topics as we move into the fall. And then I'm going to say it out loud, the winter months again. And so we'll have some great discussions with some great folks coming up for that as well. And as always with our report and this webinar series, our goal is really to make sure that we can provide working people and employers with information about issues impacting our workplaces and impacting mental health, and tools and resources that we can use to address those things. And as we continue to develop this out, we've really landed on 3 pillars that we're focused in on. And those are things that are happening in the workplace that could be impacting people's health and wellness and their mental health. Things affecting the workplace where people are going to be bringing in challenges that they're dealing with in our communities. And then individual behavioral health supports, because there's always that part of this where we as individuals have to take the initiative and take that step forward to make sure we are improving ourselves as well. So we presented a lot of data in our report and throughout our webinars on kind of how big the challenges are in our country right now when it comes to mental health, what it's doing in our workplaces, how our workplaces might be impacting that, and it can feel quite overwhelming. But because you're here, because of the work we're doing, I'm always optimistic that we'll tackle this problem together. And I think that's important, because it's not I'm going to fix it, and it's not necessarily you are going to fix it. I think it's all of us taking the time to participate in these types of webinars and trainings and just continuing to communicate it forward. So we talk a lot about stigma. I talk with a lot of employers that are fighting really hard on stigma. When I talk to the average working person, they're not really there yet. So there's a lot of communication we have to do to make sure that we're making it more accessible for people to share how they're feeling in their workplaces and outside of their workplaces, and making sure they can identify the tools they can use to improve their situation. And we're going to keep that going. And today we're going to have a really exciting presentation from Liz Rivard-Weston. She's with Oakland County Michigan Works, and she's going to share an example of how businesses can work together to create stronger workplaces. So I'll turn it over to you, Liz.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. I'm really excited to be here and to share about our Business Resource Network, which is a program that we launched back in 2019 to address barriers that employees of Oakland County companies were experiencing and still do experience on the job. So we work to alleviate those. So As Sean said, I'm Liz Rivard-Weston. I'm a program coordinator with Oakland County Michigan Works, which also I do / Oakland County Workforce Development. So I am an employee of Oakland County, and we manage and oversee the 6 Oakland County Michigan Works centers here in the county. So I'm going to try to progress to the next slide. And here we are. So Oakland County Michigan Works is one of 16 Michigan Works agencies. Our local oversight comes from David Quilter, our Oakland County executive. We have a workforce development board, and the workforce development department is housed within the Oakland County Economic Development Department. So lots of partnership there. And as you can see on the map, the state is divided out into 16 regions, and Oakland County happens to be the O on the map. I assure you that's random. But if you look at the O, that's where our services are delivered. And you can actually see we're pretty unique. We're the only single county Michigan Works area across the state. I would say the next closest thing would be our neighbors at Detroit Employment Solutions. They're the only single entity, or excuse me, the single city entity across the state. But, Oakland County is pretty diverse. We have really rural areas. We have really densely populated areas. So being a single county, it really allows us to customize exactly what we're doing here to meet the needs of our region. So taking a little bit of a deeper dive, you can see we have our 6 centers, one in Novi, Pontiac, Waterford, Troy, Oak Park, and Southfield. And this is where I like to say the magic happens. So this is where our staff that connect with our companies to provide business services are housed, in addition to our career advising staff who work with our job seekers or folks who are looking to upskill or make career changes. As I said, I work at the county, and I'm a part of a 15-person team that does more of the administrative side of it. So a lot of the report writing, program management, things like that. So quick data snapshot. We're a $24 million agency. We're the 3rd largest Michigan Works agency across the state. You can see our numbers, of the average number of businesses and job seekers that we serve. In addition, so this point is important. In addition to our 6 American Job Centers or Michigan Works Centers, we have 4 additional subrecipients, one of which is a pivotal piece of our business resource network, and I'll be spending a lot of time talking about today. But our team's made up of over 100 staff, and we've been named a leader in workforce development across the country. So let's talk about what we're here to talk about today, which is our business resource network. So like I kind of alluded to, this is an employee retention program that we did launch back in April of 2019. We're currently funded, I'm going to talk a little bit more about this too, but we're currently funded by a $1.05 million allocation of American Rescue Plan funds that was generously awarded to us by the Oakland County Board of Commissioners. So when Oakland County received these ARP funds, the Workforce Development Department in Oakland County Michigan Works was actually one of the first investments that the Board of Commissioners decided to make. So this was one of, I think, 3 other programs that were funded pretty early on in that funding source. So what is a business resource network? So it is a data-driven network of businesses that are dedicated to removing barriers experienced by their employees. So the way this is done is companies join the network, and then they have access to what's called a success coach, which you could also call like a resource navigator, that works one-on-one with the employees of their companies to alleviate any barriers that they may be experiencing. It is important to note that we tend to focus on the barrier side of things, but it can also be a positive thing, like if someone is renting and then they want to buy a house. So kind of that step up, we can help with goal setting too. But currently here in Oakland County, we have 25 members. A couple of those members have multiple locations. So 25 members, but 29 locations. When we are fully staffed, we have 4 success coaches. The team right now is hiring, I think, 2 more coaches to, get us up to speed on that. But since October 21st of 21, we have supported 289 unique employees, just over 750 services were provided, and we've spent just over $150,000 in supportive services to help folks keep their jobs. So that money is used to remove any barriers that they're experiencing so they can focus 100% on the job. So we were really excited that in the first year of our American Rescue Plan funded program, our retention rate was 90%. And how we define that is this is of the individuals who sought services from our coaches. So 90% of folks that sat across from our coaches are still employed at their company. So I introduced this concept of success coaching. So our coaches are employed through OLSA, which is the Oakland Livingston Human Service Agency, and that is the Oakland County Community Action Agency. So they're very well positioned to be providing services such as this. So they're a subrecipient of our funds, and that's who the coaches are employed through. That's where I would say like 98% of program services come from the success coaching piece. So any employee within a member company can access these services. The coaches can be on site in person, they can provide services virtually, and basically they can help with anything that your employees are struggling with. Something that's important to note, specifically because we're talking about workplace mental health, is that these coaches are not social workers, they're not therapists, they are truly resource navigators. So it's their job to either draw from the resources they already know about and or investigate new resources to provide to the employees of our member companies. So the other small percentage of our program is comprised of our monthly membership meetings, which we actually had one this morning, and a representative from each of our member companies joins virtually to review overall program utilization, what are our trending barriers. We host guest speakers. So today, for example, a colleague spoke about a training grant that members can apply for, stuff like that. So like I said, the bread and butter is really the success coaching, but we do find time to meet once a month just to review the program to make sure everything's operating the way it should and to get more information to the company representatives. So here's some examples of barriers addressed by coaches, and I should have probably put an asterisk next to them, but you can see there's a couple that I think are really traditional in the mental health space, but if you take time to really think about it, all these things fall under workplace mental health. So if you're struggling in any of these areas and beyond, I hope you can imagine how difficult it could be to show up 100% on the job. And I have some examples of success stories we're going to show a little bit later that I think really drive this point home. So the way that we provide services, and this is new with our American Rescue Plan funding. It's in 2 tiers. And the reason why I want to specify this is because when we launched the program in 2019, we only had tier 1. And this is when an employee comes to our coach, the barrier or goal is addressed through referring into existing community resources. So one of the many reasons why we contracted with OLSA to provide these services is because they already have over 70 programs in-house. So back when we were only able to provide services through referrals, a lot of those referrals were going directly into OLSA and folks were getting served in that way. So introducing those American Rescue Plan funds, we were able to implement tier 2, which is, let's say there's a long wait list. There's a small local foundation that helps people with car repairs. Well, they've been full for, I think, 2 years. They weren't able to accept any new folks with needs into that program. So that's another example why someone may move into tier 2. Basically, if there's a barrier for someone getting the services that already exist, then we can tap in to our American Rescue Plan funds and remove that barrier. So that might be helping somebody repair their vehicle, maybe some emergency childcare, if they're struggling to pay their utilities, stuff like that. So here's those success stories I alluded to. These are 2 that I'd like to share they came about in the tier 1 side of things. So we did not use any program funds outside of the salaries of the success coaches, but to alleviate these challenges. So the first example is we had a participant who was dealing with the loss of a child and another family member, and then they also suffered a stroke during that time. So, I mean, this is kind of like a triple thing that happened to this person, and this individual was also the breadwinner of their family. So during the crux of all of this tragedy, they fell behind on their bills and rent. So what the coach was able to do was not only provide rental assistance when the individual was honestly mentally ready, emotionally ready. They were able to get into some money management classes, and then also the coach was able to hook up the family with grief support for the entire family. So, if you can imagine resources like this, I would wager, was a reason why this individual is still employed with the company. I think something this devastating could really jeopardize someone's employment, if they don't have the ability to show up and do the things they need to do to keep their job. So one example, again, we didn't use any supportive service dollars. This was all through community referrals. The second story revolves around somebody who was in a great financial need, and they acquired an $800 payday loan. And unfortunately, they did not read or perhaps understand the fine print. And the interest rate, which I can't remember what it was, I think it was a triple-digit percentage interest rate. Either way, the term of the loan was 20 months, and it was going to be more than $4,000 on an $800 loan. So as you can imagine, this individual was quite distressed. So what the coach was able to do was call the Attorney General's office, basically call anybody who would answer the phone to try to get this addressed, and come to find out that loan company wasn't licensed to do business in the state of Michigan. And they were able to get that loan, I'm going to say forgiven, because I don't know whether to erased is probably a better term, like it never happened, and the payments that this participant had made towards the loan were refunded. So I think this is a great example too of business happens 9 to 5 typically. So that individual may have had to maybe take some time off work in order to make those phone calls. But again, kind of being in the heat of it, I think it likely would have been very challenging for the person to kind of see the light at the end of the tunnel. So the coach is the person that was able to step in, because it is their 9 to 5 job to do work like this while on the clock. So, they were able to take the time to call the people that were needed to be called in order to alleviate this challenge. So again, just 2 examples, but these are things we're particularly proud of. So when I'm presenting to companies that are in Oakland County, trying to encourage them to join our program, I typically end right about here, but I have some more things I'd like to share about the network after this slide. So I ask questions like, is joining the BRN right for your company? And here's some screening questions. Have you had an employee who's been late or absent due to issues not related to work? Have you had an employee who requested a loan from their 401k or from you as their employer? Have you had an employee come to you with a problem that's not related to work? Or perhaps they've had disciplinary issues when, generally speaking, the work has been good, or maybe they're one of your star employees. Have you had folks quit due to them getting a wage increase, resulting in them losing public benefits? And have you had folks leave your place of employment due to workplace culture? So, if you're answering yes to one or all of these questions, perhaps the Business Resource Network could be right for you and to help alleviate some of the challenges that your employees may be experiencing. And sometimes when I talk to companies, one of the things they say is, well, our folks are fine. Like, I haven't really heard of anything. And it seems like there's honestly I feel like there's 2 types of employees. I'm sure there's more, but in this discussion, some are the ones that fully share everything that's going on and everything that they're struggling with their managers or with HR, et cetera. Then there's others that really keep it inside, and they don't feel comfortable kind of airing that in their place of employment. What's nice about the coach is they're a neutral person that comes in. They are totally confidential, and you can work one-on-one with that employee without the risk of them being embarrassed by having to share something they're struggling with their peers. So, like I said, that's typically where I wrap up. But since I'm talking to representatives from across the state, I wanted to talk about the BRN across the state. The important caveat is I'm only an authority on the Oakland County Business Resource Network, so I can't speak in details about what's going on in other Michigan Works areas across the state, but I'm hopeful that I can provide some information that will help you on your Business Resource Network journey. So in terms of funding, I wanted to outline how has our program been funded since 2019, because there are some similarities across the state. So like I said, back in 2019, we launched and we had funding from the Labor and Economic Opportunity Department, so LEO, at the state, and that's how we launched. So all 16 Michigan Works agencies received maybe not the same dollar amount in funding, but the same type of funding with the goal of launching this network. So this funding ended in September of 2021. And at this time, some MWAs or Michigan Works agencies, excuse me, decided for whatever reason, again, I can only speak to Oakland County, to not offer the program anymore, and likely due to funding challenges. Now, something that Oakland County has done differently is that since the beginning, we have not charged companies to be a member of our business resource network. We've offered this at no cost. Now, I think we're the odd one out. The other Michigan Works agencies that did have their networks were charging membership fees in order to sustain the program. So going back to 2021 in September, some were able to use the funding that they were collecting over time to sustain their program. Some didn't have the funds to sustain their program. So that's when the numbers of the BRNs kind of started dwindling a little bit. So what we did in Oakland is we tried to implement charging for membership, but again, knowing that the funding was running out. So that happened in April of 2021 until September of 2021. And we went from having 16 members to 2 members. And 1, we think the money was a factor, but 2, if you think of the timing, we were in the crux of the pandemic. So truthfully, on our end, the timing couldn't have been worse, but we were just trying to keep the network afloat in the only way we knew how at the time. So we were so relieved and greatly appreciated that we received this American Rescue Plan funds to basically, I'm going to say, relaunch the program in October of 2021, because we were able to go back to the no cost structure. And like I shared, we were able to implement the supportive services bucket. So this was our funding journey. As of September 30th of 2024, we will no longer have funding, but we're starting these conversations internally because, like I said, we have 25 members. There's definitely an appetite for it. So, we are actively looking at ways to continue offering this as well. But what does this mean across the system? It means, I guess I went forward too early. It means there may not be a business resource network currently active in your area. So if this is something you're interested in, regardless of where you are in the state of Michigan, I encourage you to contact your local Michigan Works agency and ask, are you operating a business resource network? Can I get more information? And if they're not, something I can share is I recently learned that there's some considerations of potentially, if I was typing, I would be underlining some and potentially releasing funds to kind of reinvigorate the business resource network structure across the state. So again, I'm only an authority of what's going on here in Oakland, but in order for something like that to float and for all the MWAs to receive the funding, they would need company support. So even if there isn't one in your region, I highly recommend reaching out to your local Michigan Works agency because it will allow them to know that there's an appetite in their area. And if they do move forward with, getting the funds and setting it up, that there are organizations that want to take part in this. So next steps, so these are your action items. If you're located in Oakland County and you're interested, please feel free to contact me. I'd love to learn more about what's going on at your organization, how this program may be able to positively impact, your retention rates. If you're not in Oakland County, please do reach out to your local Michigan Works agency. If you need help locating that, my email's on the next slide. You're more than welcome to contact me and I can make introductions to any of the MWAs across the state. So I'd like to offer that to this group if needed. But yeah, so that's what I had to share with you today on our business resource network. Like I said, I think this is totally aligned with the workplace mental health discussion, because if folks are struggling with anything from a death in the family to not having access to safe and reliable transportation, that really takes a toll on folks. And our goal here is to help people show up to work 100% and give 100% while they're on the job. So I look forward to answering any questions.
Well, I would like to start with 3 questions for you, if I could.
Absolutely.
So first, you said right now you have 25 members in the Business Resource Network. Can you share a little bit about, are they big employers, manufacturing, construction? Like, what do they look like?
Absolutely. So this is unique to Oakland County because of our funding source, but we are the American Rescue Plan requires us to serve what they deem is small employers, and how it's defined differently everywhere, but how it's defined in the American Rescue Plan language is 500 employees or less. So our largest company has 500 employees, and our smallest, I believe, has 14. So that, I guess, is the size. If you'd like to know the types of members, we have manufacturers, hotels, assisted living communities, healthcare organizations, disaster restoration. So like if your basement floods, like those types of companies.
Cool. So the other thing, so you have 25 members right now, so their employees can participate with the Business Resource Network tools, right?
Mm-hmm.
What if I'm a worker in Oakland County and I saw those examples and it's like something I could use? Can they call you too, or what do they do?
That's a good question. So right now, Oakland County Michigan Works does have funding to help folks with barriers when they're already employed. We don't have, it's not our biggest funding source, but we do have some funds available that are actually through the American Rescue Plan as well. So if somebody calls me and says, hey, I'm struggling with transportation, but they don't work for one of our member companies, what I would do is refer them to one of our Oakland County Michigan Works centers, and they can, be basically evaluated or enrolled to see if we can provide assistance through those grants. Another way is that if anybody on this call is an employee of an organization and you're interested, you or your peers, I would encourage you to talk to your HR department. I'm okay with your team, Sean, sharing this PowerPoint. So if someone wants to, forward this to their leadership to say, this is a resource I'd like to look into and I think would be good for the company, I would greatly encourage folks to do that.
Especially now through 2024, right? Because the company,
Yes.
it doesn't cost them anything to participate. So
Absolutely.
all they have to do is be available. So that's actually good. And then the last question, and I'm sure I'll have more, but the last question. Okay. So in our work, we have learned a lot about employee assistance programs or employee services programs. They call them EAPs or ESPs. Yep. For most of us watching, we're familiar with the EAP. And that's something that a lot of employers have access to for employees. But that, in my experience or my discussion so far, is typically more limited. It's really about I'm having a current mental health or medical challenge and I need help in some way. It really sounds like your program with the Business Resource Network is almost a perfect tag along or parallel, for lack of a better word, to provide even more extensive services to employees that are going to cover a much broader range of issues. I imagine many of your 25 members have an EAP or something like that. Do you have any feedback or any thoughts on kind of how they feel about, like, this is a great add-on to make sure we're covering employees?
Absolutely. I'm really glad you brought this up. So I don't know how many of our 25 members have an EAP, but what I do know is that when a company participates in the Business Resource Network and also as a part of an EAP program, that they see a higher usage rate of their EAP program, because the coach can refer folks to say, contact your EAP program for, mental health services or something like that. Because again, I want to highlight our coaches, again, this is Oakland County, our coaches are not social workers, they're not therapists. So if someone's saying, I'm struggling with my mental health, the coach will listen. But the next step is, how can we get you to, a provider that is better equipped to help in this sort of situation? So a lot of times the AP is the first stop on that journey.
Okay. We had just a couple of questions in the Q&A. Sure. And one of them was, are you familiar with what other counties might have had success with their BRNs or this program?
So something back when we launched in 2019, something that took place in Southeast Michigan was the BRN representatives like myself of the 6 MWAs in Southeast Michigan. Michigan Works agencies in Southeast Michigan, we would meet once a month or every other month to kind of compare and contrast what's working. How are you, how are you recruiting companies? How are you providing services? Things like that. So, I mean, I can speak to what was happening in Southeast Michigan, and all the programs were very strong. A lot of we learned a lot from each other. And I think because of that and our willingness to share, our programs are able to thrive in conjunction with each other. Something else that's helpful is like what may result from this conversation today. If somebody from, let's say, Macomb County calls me, I can, call up my now friend, right, who works in that space in Macomb and make that warm introduction so then they can find out more information about the program in their area.
Cool. We had a couple, we'll go just a minute over if that's okay.
Oh, okay.
We had a couple of questions just pop in. One is, does your BRN team members generally meet with employees in crisis in person, virtually, over the phone? How do they do it?
Good question. So while the coaches are in person at most of our member companies, what we find is that a lot of times the employees will call, that they feel more comfortable sharing what's going on over the phone. But it's nice because, I don't want to say it's nice, but the positive is that, they can kind of do the initial conversation over the phone, but because the coach is coming on the work site in person, if there's paperwork that needs to be signed or anything like that, no one has to make a special trip. They'll just say, hey, thanks for telling me about this. Here's the next steps. Please meet me during essentially my office hours next time I'm on site, and we'll get all this started. So a lot of it happens over the phone.
One shout out, one of our participants today said they use the service in Emmett County, and it's been wonderful in all caps and helpful to employees, helpful in all caps. And then I think a suggestion, could this also be called the Retention Solutions Network instead of Business Resource Network, which is a wonderful thought. So we like that. That's the end of the questions we currently have in our Q&A box. So just thank you so much, Liz, for sharing the information today. It sounds like a wonderful program and a great adder for employers out there that do or do not have EAPs to provide a whole host of services beyond what we would traditionally expect from sort of the EAP programs. I have heard of some EAPs that might have some of these additional pieces, but not to the extent that the BRNs provide them. And I think it's a wonderful opportunity for us to help promote the work that's happening in the BRNs. I hope you all appreciated the webinar today. Again, I keep posted to your inboxes because we're going to set up a couple of additional webinars in addition to our regular series with some great information we've recently come across and some tools that can come into our workplaces in a strong way. So we're pretty excited about those. And we'll keep it going with next month. We're going to be talking about we're going to be talking about trauma and how trauma comes into the workplace with our friends from the Corporation for a Skilled Workforce. So thank you so much for joining us today, and I look forward to talking to you next month.